Good morning, ladies, gents and Pikachus. Welcome back to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. Yeah, so I got a special episode for you today. We'll be breaking this thing down verse by verse, as we always do, into factual, logical statements in English so we can understand who or what is Allah, what does he mean by the contents of his book, and more importantly for us as non-believers, how does this affect us in our lives today? So before I start, as I always do, I'm going to tell you now to read and translate and understand this, an Arabic Quran first, if you have any doubts as to my factual accuracy or the things I'm about to say now. Once you have done so, you'll recognise everything I'm about to say is 100% factual of what Allah says in his book and what Muslims believe today. So before I get started, I'll remind you of the last episode in case you didn't see it. We went through how Allah inspires terrorism in his followers as a general command, and he even says if you don't want to do this, you're a bad Muslim and you will burn in hell forever. So he makes sure his Muslims know exactly where they stand in terms of his clear and obvious instructions to go and kill all those non-believers and terrify them while he's doing it. But then he says at the end of it, it's actually righteous and good, and they're the evil guys. So that's where we got up to, and that's where we're going to lift off from now. 155. Surely Allah will forgive those who turn their back to Islam, where by right they should have been executed. Surely it was by Satan's guidance that they did turn away. When they return to submission, Allah will pardon them. End of verse. So, breaking this down, surely Allah will forgive those who turn back to Islam after he's said you all have to go and be terrorists and blow yourselves up in the cause of the holy jihad. Probably what happened is many Muslims thought, I'm not doing this, and although they couldn't openly say it, they're heading for the exit. They're, they're like trying to back out of this slowly without anyone noticing, and Allah hasn't seen this, and he knows they're leaving, so he's saying, I'll forgive you if you come back, O Muslims, you shouldn't have turned your back on me, but if you come back, I'll surely forgive you, where by right you should just be executed. So Allah is literally saying, I'll forgive you, but you should have been killed. I'm only going to forgive you if you go and kill those non-believers. So that's what he's saying there is, if you come back, I'll forgive you, but only if you kill those guys. You should have been executed anyway, but because you're going to kill those guys, I won't execute you. Which I suppose gives us a little bit more insight into how Allah just doesn't understand forgiveness in the slightest. Forgiveness is not, I'll forgive you if you do something. That's a deal, a bargain. Forgiveness is not a bargain. Forgiveness is just, I forgive you, I'll forget what you did wrong. But in this instance, the only thing they've done wrong is not worship enough and buggered off and not done enough Allah obedience stuff. So he's saying, I'll forgive you if you come back, although you should have been executed. I'll forget that if you kill those guys. Then he finishes off by saying, surely it was by Satan's guidance that they did turn away. Which is a curious thing to say, because, hang on a minute. Allah, mate. Come over here, Allah. I'm sorry to wake you up, mate. Allah, do you remember what you said to me before about how everything was your guidance? 100% of what people do is your will. Do you remember that? Yeah, remember saying that you wrote everyone's pathway and it leads back to you and everything they do, say, or think is actually your idea. You do remember that? Yeah, good. Good. See, the thing is, the reason I bring it up to you, Allah, when you say surely it was by Satan's guidance that they did turn away from Islam, I thought you said 100% of everyone's thoughts was your guidance. What's that? You're definitely not Satan? Because it says so in your book? Okay, yeah, we'll talk about this later. So Allah tells me that he's definitely not Satan, even though he said earlier 100% of what everyone does is his guidance. Now he's saying the guys that leave and then want to come back later, they're doing that because of Satan's guidance. So I think Satan has more powerful, more skills than this guy, if this line is to be believed. But then again, I'm not sure Satan's a different guy to Allah. I think maybe he's got a bit of a split personality going on there. And actually, Satan's guidance is pretty much the same thing as Allah's guidance. Because if you know about Satan in the Christian and Jewish circles, Satan indeed does command you to go and kill your enemies and do an eye for an eye, not forgive anyone, blow yourself up, and does threatening and cursing and lying to get you to do this. Which is exactly what Allah does. But anyway, we'll carry on. He says, when they return to submission, Allah will pardon them. even though they haven't done anything. And he's only pardoning them because they're going to go and kill his enemies in the holy jihad. So that's what this means. And we carry on. 156. O ye Muslims. So you know he's going to give you when he says O ye Muslims, he's about to give you an instruction, O Muslims. So we know that's what he's going to do. O ye Muslims, never become like those infidels who say to their brothers, quote, had we been there, you would have never been killed, end quote. But I thought you said a minute ago none of them got killed. In the last few episodes, we've been going through the Battle of Badr, where Allah sent 8,000 angels to help Mohammed and his troops win and beat the other guys at Medina who were probably Muslims, but they weren't the right kind of Muslims. So they all got slaughtered to a man and they took over the town for these Muslims. And none of them got killed because remember, 3,000 angels, then another 5,000 angels. Mohammed was there as well. It was the full complement. Conclusive victory. Flawless victory. According to Allah. But now he's saying something different. Now he's saying, actually what happened is some of them did die. And the guys who weren't there at the battle were saying, you see, if we'd have been there, you wouldn't have died. Even though you had 8,000 angels and Mohammed and Allah was watching you to send you his angels. If we'd have been there, there would have been more of you. And we would have been part of it. You wouldn't have had to die. So the between the lines thing is, other Muslims are telling these Muslims, those guys that got killed, that must be Allah's will. So if we'd have been there, they wouldn't have died. Even though it's Allah's will. So what he's saying is, the guys who wish they were at the battle are bad Muslims, because they're mourning the death of their brothers. But the brothers were meant to die. It was Allah's will that they died. Or maybe it was Satan's guidance because they turned their back. Well, we will never know because it's very sketchy on the details. But what it sounds like to me, O Muslims, is Allah is saying, O ye Muslims, never become like those infidels, the guys who died for me, that I needed to support with angels. Don't become like them. Say to your brothers who wish they'd been there to save them from dying, say, no. You guys are infidels too because you don't understand. They didn't die because the enemy killed them. No. They were killed because Allah willed it. It was Allah's guidance that got them killed because he wanted them to get killed because they were also infidels. So the plot thickens. Allah kills his own guys on the battlefield, then makes up for it by sending angels to support the remaining guys. And it's all one of his little tests. He's only doing this to make sure, because he knows and he watches you, he's making sure you are worshipping him enough and you are obedient to Allah and you don't think that it's anything to do with you why you're winning or losing these battles. It's nothing to do with your sword arm, your technique or your weaponry or your strategies. Oh no. It's 100% the will of Allah, even if you die. That's what this means. Then he finishes off by saying, Allah alone chooses when all men die. Should you turn away, Allah will make you regret this in your heart, for Allah gives life and death and knows well all that ye do. So I feel like Allah is tightening his stranglehold on your neck now, O Muslims, because he knows that you're thinking, this is nonsense. Nobody dies on the battlefield because their own God wants them to. Surely their own God would want them to win. People are dying on the battlefield because their enemy's killing them. It's not anything to do with Allah's will. So they're thinking that. Other Muslims are saying, no, don't think that because you'll be an infidel if you think that. The other guys who wanted to be at the battle, they can't think that either because they're now infidels. So half the Muslims are now infidels just based on this battle. And the long and short of it after that is Allah is saying, don't have any doubts. Allah chooses who lives or dies. Allah chooses who wins the battle. Allah even chooses who is an infidel or not and who has doubts. And we know this because Allah knows all ye do. That's explicitly what this says. So even though it makes no sense, that's what it says in this book. If you don't believe me, buy it, translate it, read it yourself. And we move on. 157. And despite your many sins... What sins? They haven't... Allah, sorry to wake you up again. I just got a few questions for you. In verse 157 of Al-Imran, when you say, and despite your many sins, what sins are they doing? Oh, okay, yeah, thanks for clearing that up for me, Allah. You go back to bed. So what he tells me is, despite your many sins, O Muslims, your many sins are that you died in the battle because you didn't have enough faith and obedience for Allah. And the sin of dying on the battlefield is so bad the other people who were there have to share it with you, despite the fact that they wish they could have been there to save you. They weren't because of Allah. If they had been there, the only reason they would have been there is because of Allah. So the fact that they weren't there and you died is because of Allah, but it's a great sin because they died. Literally makes no sense whatsoever, but that's what's written here. If you don't believe me, buy it and read it yourself. So, despite your many sins, whatever else you do, if you die in the service of the cause of Allah, you know, the holy jihad that you're definitely going to die during, then fully are you pardoned for the great sins of wishing your brothers hadn't died earlier. So if you'd have been at the jihad and they hadn't died, that would have been a great sin too. But the fact that you weren't there and they died means you're pardoned as long as you die in the next one. So you have to die to get... This is giving me a headache, Allah. Seriously, go away. So anyway, he finishes off by saying, if you die, even though you're a big sinner because you didn't die in the last battle, if you die in the next battle, then you are fully pardoned for it, because forgiveness and mercy from Allah is greater than wealth. All the wealth that they had gathered. So they must mean the Christians. So actually, the reason the battle didn't go as well as he previously said it did was because the guys who had their head turned and weren't obedient and faithful in Allah had been spending time with the Christians, maybe, eating food, getting free money, getting Bibles, getting a blessing from Christ from them. Or maybe that's the great sin, he just didn't want to admit to it. So the great sin was getting the blessing from Christ off the missionaries, eating some food for once, because they don't have any, then not dying in their battle, and then dying in the next one. But they'll be pardoned for that, because forgiveness and mercy is Allah's great wealth, and it's greater than all the stuff you're going to get over there with those Christians. So don't worry about those guys, don't be jealous. Just go and kill them, we can take all their stuff later. That's what this means. 158. And what you did, and where you did die or were slain for the causes of Allah, whatever else you do, it is back to Allah that you will be gathered, for Allah is your end. I see what he's doing here. So, when you die, whether you were killed by the enemy, whether you were killed because Allah just wanted you dead, whether you did something else and you suffered a misfortune and died, whatever you die for, if your cause was to kill the non-believers, you know, doing the holy jihad, then you're forgiven for whatever else you did. So the great sins that he was talking about a minute ago, despite your many sins, those ones will be forgiven. And the fact that you let your brothers die and wished you were there but you weren't, and it was Allah's will, despite the fact that you argued with Allah's will by wanting your brothers to not die, all that's going to be forgiven, and it is back to Allah that you will be gathered. So as long as you are faithful with Allah, despite all this nonsensical rubbish, your brothers dying, you not being there, you being a great sinner because you weren't there, even though you weren't there because of Allah's will, all of that doesn't matter. As long as you are worshipping enough and obedient to Allah, then you'll be forgiven and Allah will be your end. Get it? I think he's having a senior moment. He must have been when he was writing this, because it doesn't make any sense. But that is exactly what it says. So I'll carry on. 159. Allah's mercy demands you allow their return. He's talking about the guys who come back from the Christian camp that we forgot to mention earlier in the Quran. You know, when I speculated that was what was happening, the guys coming back from the Christians and getting free food. Those guys are who we're talking about now. Even maybe there are some pieces missing from this. That's what I'm gleaning here. You can't go from one situation to this one and expect that people are going to follow it, because you're talking about two separate groups in different situations. So before we were talking about Muslims who died in battle and their brothers who weren't there, who wished they had been, being sinners because they should have stayed at home, and they did stay at home. But because they wished they were there, that's a sin because Allah's will. Now, we're not talking about those guys anymore. Now we're talking about how Allah's mercy demands you allow their return. So he's talking about Muslims who have been to the Christians, who are still alive and are now coming back from the Christians. And because they've been over there getting blessings from Christ and free food, you're thinking, I want to kill you guys now because you're not allowed to hang around with those Christians. Why couldn't I be one of those guys that got free food? We're going to kill you now, O Muslim. But no, Allah demands your mercy. You allow their return. Do not treat them harshly. Otherwise, they will never return to you in the first place. To fight against our avowed enemy. That's the important bit. The reason these guys are allowed to come back, getting their pardon, getting forgiven, is not because they're getting forgiven or pardoned for their own merit. Allah's mercy and grace doesn't extend as far as that. All it extends as far as is these guys can carry swords, and we got Jews we need to kill, so they're the guys to do it. Now it makes sense. So if we read all three of those verses as if they're one verse, if he had a literacy skill that was actually good, he would have combined these. What he's saying is this. Most Muslims I'm going to send to the battlefield are going to die. But the ones that die are dying because it's my will, because they didn't read this enough and they weren't worshipping me enough. The ones who I didn't send and who obeyed me by not going and staying back, they're the good ones. If they didn't listen to me and went to the battlefield and got killed as well, it's because they didn't listen to me. The ones that stayed while the battle was going on, sneaked off to get free food from the Christians when no one was looking. Now they're trying to come back, and we need them because we've got less guys. So Allah is saying, guys, forgive these guys, even though they're traitors and they got free food from the Christians. Don't treat them harshly, even though they should by rights be executed, as we said in the beginning. It was Satan's guidance that led them over there to get free food and get a blessing from Christ and still be alive. So let them come back, don't treat them harshly. I will forgive them myself, says Allah, as long as they agree to go and die in the next battle. That's what this means. So you will pardon them and ask Allah's forgiveness for them, and solely depend upon Allah, for He loves your dependency. End verse. So we know from this, Allah doesn't want you to be self-sufficient, O Muslims. The reason He's keeping you in poverty, sending you to your doom, and then telling off the ones that survive, calling them sinners, saying that, they're infidels, but they're as good as infidels. He wants you to be dependent on Him. He's literally like an abusive partner. But anyway, that's what this says. I think the less said about these verses, the better, because it's not only nonsensical, it's actually just evil, what He's inflicting upon His loyal, faithful Muslims here. Despite the fact that most of them already have died, these are the ones that didn't die, and He's just flaming them and calling them near infidels, saying they've got no faith and the rest of it. Satan's guiding them. So anyway, 160. If Allah wills your victory, then none can ever defeat you, and if you turn away from Him, who else will grant you victory? Let all the believers depend solely upon Allah. End verse. So if we break this down, if Allah wills your victory, then none can ever defeat you. So as I was saying a minute ago, when Allah sent all these guys with Mohammed and the angels to Medina, and half of them got killed, that was actually Allah's will, and He was just testing them to see what they were like. Turns out they weren't good enough Muslims, they weren't reading this enough, and that's the reason He had them killed by His enemies, even though He had 8,000 angels there. The reason they died, according to this, is because Allah didn't will them to win, because if He did, none would have been able to defeat them. So even one Muslim against like a whole army, if Allah wills it, that one guy will kill the whole army. That's what this means. If you turn away from Him, who else will grant you victory? That Jesus guy and those Christians who were giving you free food, who were really nice to you and gave you Christ's blessing, they won't be able to support you. They won't be able to give you victory. No, only Allah will, even though the rest of His guys just got killed and you were saying how you wish you could have been there to help them. Look, I didn't write it, okay? I'm trying to make this make sense, but Allah has done the best He can to make it not make sense. And I can't really re-edit the whole book down, or otherwise it wouldn't be the Quran of the Muslims, would it? So anyway, that's how this verse ends. Let all the believers depend solely upon Allah. Don't think Christ is going to help you. Don't think any of your other Muslims are going to help you. When I send you to your death, blindly obey and go. Otherwise you're bad. That's what this means. And then we reach our last verse. Our prophet does not abide any cheating for this. He will ensure your defeat, and you will be brought before me on the day of resurrection. And every soul will pay back to Allah everything they owe to Him. End of verse, end of reading. So that's interesting, isn't it, when we get to that last line. Our prophet, who is Mohammed, our prophet who does not abide any cheating for this, so when I send you to your death, O Muslim, you have to go. There's no cheating. When I tell you to not go, and you think you should go, you should stay, no cheating. If there's any cheating going on here, if you go when I've told you to stay, or you stay when I've told you to go, Mohammed will be watching you too. So not only is Allah going to be watching and hearing everything you do and knowing all and writing your path, just in case you deviate from the path He's written you and you do something He doesn't see, Mohammed is stuck to the back of his head watching that way. So it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. But Allah is saying if He doesn't catch you, Mohammed will. That's why He's saying that. And then He says He will ensure your defeat. So Mohammed is behind you when you go to battle. If you're not worshipping enough, then Mohammed is going to ensure that you lose. It's not going to be because your battle strategy sucks and your weapons aren't very good and you're not motivated at all. It's simply going to be because Allah doesn't want you to win, and that's why he's got Mohammed there, to make sure that you don't. That's exactly what this means. And then he finishes up by saying, "You will be brought before me, Allah, in the book on the day of resurrection, and every soul will pay back into Allah what they owe to him." So we're back to the earlier doctrine that he said everyone when they're born owes a debt to Allah because their birth is a great injustice to him. That's why he enslaves you and has to make you do everything for his holy jihad. But what's going to happen, O Muslims? I'll tell you what this means. You will be brought back before me on the day of resurrection. So before the day of resurrection happens, which is after the end times genocidal prophecy is complete, when everyone else on earth but Muslims dies, all the men lay dead, all the women are in chains being slaves. Before that day, if there's any Jews still alive, before that's resurrection day. Before that, you go to purgatory. That's how Mohammed is going to make sure everything's fair, no cheating. Because after you die, you're dead, you're not on earth anymore, but you're not in the paradise because it hasn't been created yet, because you haven't seen the last resurrection day. So before your death and resurrection day, the bit in the middle is purgatory. I knew it. So this whole religion is based off of Jesuit order doctrine. It's basically Catholicism. That's what Catholics believe. Catholics through the Pope believe you can't go directly to heaven through Christ like normal Christians can. Oh no, you need to pay your sins off with money by confessing your sins to a bishop, a priest, or the Catholic Pope. And if you don't do that, you go to purgatory, where one of these archangel guys will be watching over you and burning off your sins one at a time. Which is exactly what this is saying. Before the resurrection day, after you die, Mohammed will be watching you, and he'll make sure you pay back, and I quote, everything you owe unto Allah, and every soul will pay it. So this is literally I've got it. Universality, the oneness, Catholicism and Islam, they're both doing the same thing, aren't they? Think about it. The Pope is doing the job of Mohammed, but Mohammed's dead, and the reason Islam split in two, Sunnis and Shiites, is because half of them thought, no, we'll stick with the old version when it was just the Quran and it was just Allah, and half of them were like, no, let's stick with Mohammed, let's promote someone else into the role of Mohammed and follow that guy. So it's exactly like what happened with Protestants and Catholics in the Church of Christianity, only the Christian church didn't start murdering each other and then plan to murder everybody else, whereas Islam did. So, I didn't see, that's a bit of a left turn, isn't it? So what I think is happening here, our prophet who does not abide any cheating, who by the way was married to a 40-year-old Catholic nun and was a white guy, Mohammed, the white guy Catholic preacher, or ex-Catholic preacher, is introducing purgatory into the Islam faith. That's what's happening here. So all the stuff before about despite your many sins you'll be forgiven and you do this and that and the other and the terrorist bit, that's all true as well. But the main takeaway from this page, oh reader, oh ladies, gents and Pikachus, is if you have any outstanding sins that haven't been pardoned directly by Allah when you die in battle doing the holy jihad, guess where you end up? Purgatory, with all the bad Catholics with sins to burn off. And Mohammed is there, because paradise hasn't been created yet. So all the other dead Muslims are in purgatory right now, along with Mohammed, and that is where you will go if you have any sins outstanding that aren't cancelled by you killing the Christians and Jews. Oh, that is outrageous. So anyway, big left turn there that I didn't see coming, but I'm glad we got there and we understand that this is exactly what Allah is saying in his book. If you don't believe me, buy it, translate it and read it. 100% of that is in here and is accurate. And that's the end of this video. So I hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. We'll be back at 4:15 this afternoon to go through more about how, I think we're going to touch on how Mohammed is actually a double agent, isn't he? He's kind of a Jesuit, he's a Catholic guy. The purgatory idea was stolen from Catholicism. There's no way he came up with that on his own. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the evening episode of Without Lies, Islam Dies. Until then, have a lovely day, God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. So Mohammed is a Jesuit then, or some kind of Catholic, definitely some secret society guy. Anyway, that's all for now. If you want to hear about Mohammed and his secret societies, come back at 4:15. I'll see you then. God bless. In the meantime, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.